I think we can all agree the Disney Plus Marvel shows have been pretty meh, providing nothing of notoriety and being a little lackluster. Come on, let's be honest, no one's rewatching these. WandaVision started off as risque and experimental for Marvel, but eventually went the generic MCU route. Falcon and the Winter Soldier was just kind of forgettable to me, and the only interesting part being John Walker. Loki I actually somewhat enjoyed, but to me, got too large scale and was inconsistent in quite a few areas. And well, Hawkeye had a plot that was completely uninteresting and boring, feeling like a chore to watch. Although on the other hand, What If was a show I somewhat enjoyed. I just feel the episodes could have been longer to really flesh out the ideas more. And still after that I was optimistic that Moon Knight would break the cycle of these mediocre shows. And, well, does it? Kinda, yeah, I guess. If you've seen my previous reviews on the individual episodes, you'll know I knew some stuff about the character going into the show, such as the multiple personalities and the Egyptian connection. And if you're wondering why I stopped doing the individual episode reviews, 1, just talking about a single episode at a time didn't feel like there was enough to talk about and really get into. And 2, I just couldn't be arsed anymore. So this is going to be an overview of the entire series. First off, my favourite aspect of the show was the main character, or characters, that being Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, who are both being played by Oscar Isaac, who does a great job at individualising the two personalities. Even though they share the body, they very much feel like two different people, which is always the goal for any actor playing a character with multiple personalities. His performance is definitely the highlight of the show, and Mark and Stephen's journey throughout is definitely the most interesting aspect of the story, starting from Stephen, who is just completely confused, acting as a great surrogate for the audience, then getting introduced to Mark and starting to piece together the plot. We get this great brother-like dynamic between the two, which becomes a lot more meaningful when you learn of Mark's past. But just seeing them gradually build trust and work together using each other's strengths to their advantage is a great arc to watch. Although the one part I found a bit weird is, to balance the scale, Mark had to let go of Stephen, essentially killing him, and I thought that was a really powerful moment in a bittersweet way, showing Mark conquering his past at the cost of Stephen, who was only semi-real. And you know, I actually felt that. No! But the show was just like, shut up, bitch! And brought him back, which kind of cheapened the previous part for me. But it isn't too much of a problem because I do like Stephen and I'm glad to see the dynamic between the two continue. Also, Moon Knight and Mr. Knight's costumes had great designs and, you know, they really felt individual but similar. So they did a good job of representing each personality with them. Now on to the side characters. We have Layla, who is Mark's wife, who acts as a good companion without undermining the protagonist. There's also an interesting subplot involving her father, which creates somewhat of a rift between her and Mark. However, I feel the idea was somewhat wasted and it's kind of swept under the rug pretty quick. Although one dumb part with her character is, as soon as she gets her powers, she's like an expert with them, which I thought was a bit dumb. We also have the main antagonist, Arthur Harrow, who started out as quite an interesting character, having a compelling motivation and an unrelenting devotion, even at the cost of himself, which I actually quite liked. However, after episode 2, the show sort of forgets about him. Yeah, he's around, but you don't really learn any more about him or see flashbacks to when he was Khonshu's avatar, which I think could have been cool. So to me, that's a bit of a missed opportunity with his character. Speaking of Khonshu, the Egyptian god who bestows the Moon Knight powers upon his avatar, I liked him. I thought he was a really interesting character who was painted in a bit of a grey area, as he does dispense justice but in a vengeful and brutal way, whilst also somewhat taking control over someone, which was shown to seriously affect someone's personal life. Though his dedication to the cause is very admirable, somewhat similar to Harrow, which I thought was a great parallel between them two characters, and it's definitely played up towards the end. There's also the other characters like the rest of the gods, but there's not really much to talk about with them, although I did like that hippo person. Another thing I quite liked in the show was the variety of locations. We got London, Egypt, tombs and the afterlife, and this sort of weird dreamlike psychiatric ward. It's always interesting seeing travel within stories, especially ones like this which have elements of adventure and somewhat treasure hunting. But now onto stuff I kind of found disappointing. Number 1 being the action. Firstly, I feel we didn't get a lot of fight scenes with Mark/Stephen as Moon Knight, which is even more disappointing when the first episode did such a good job of exciting me with us seeing it from Stephen's perspective, just seeing the aftermath of the fights building up to the reveal at the end of episode 1, giving us a glimpse of Moon Knight's brutal power. But nothing ever lives up to that. And the second problem for me with the action is that it just wasn't brutal enough despite having a mature rating. You know, it was no more violent than any other PG Marvel project. I just think they need to get them nuts! And no, I'm not just bloodthirsty. Look at shows like Daredevil, where graphic violence really added weight and consequences to story and its characters, also giving a more serious sense of danger. Moon Knight really could have done with this. With Moon Knight himself, shows how brutal and dangerous he is, and that would have strengthened the idea of Mark/Steven wanting to be free if the powers brought out a much more animalistic version of yourself, a part of yourself you were terrified of. Because the show somewhat hints to that, but being honest, what are the downsides of having the powers? Because Khonshu literally doesn't take you over, you are still in complete control. So I think this show did a poor job at expressing an interesting idea. The next part is more of a personal preference to me, but I feel the show went a bit too much with the mythical elements. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but I preferred the mythological aspects near the beginning, when it was quite mysterious, and I think keeping some of that mystery all the way through could have been better than giving us a very clear understanding by the end of the series. But overall, I enjoyed this show, especially compared to the previous Disney Plus Marvel shows, being much more interesting and having an individual personality more so than any of the rest had. So, it is the best Disney Plus show, but Daredevil is still the best overall, you know. So yeah, a good starting season, but nothing mind-blowingly amazing, and I think it could have definitely benefited from having more episodes, as I feel that it could have solved a few of my issues, you know, having more room to breathe, and get more into the cool ideas it brought up. So there is room to improve, and I hope we do get a second season, as this is a solid foundation despite my critiques. And if you do like numbers, I'd probably give this a 7 out of 10. So yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.
I'm going to, okay? Uh-oh, Will Smith just smacked the shit out. Uh-oh.
Oh, that's hot.